Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time we're talking episode 4 of season 2 of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. called I Will Face My Enemy. And I can't help but I gotta say, when I hear that title, I think of the main battle song from the video game Persona 4. But I'm just a big Persona 4 fanboy, so I guess I can't help that. But anyway, this is another episode that I think is pretty strong. It's much more focused in on individual members of the group. This is basically an episode that's really all about Fitz, May, and Coulson. And the other characters have their little moments, and the plot kind of inches forward some. But those are the three characters that this episode really focuses in on. So let's just kind of jump right in and talk about what's going on with those three. And I want to start by sharing with you this quote that Clark Gregg put out on Twitter last night during the episode. Now, Clark Gregg is actually really good about live tweeting and stuff during episodes. In fact, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. guys and the people behind them are all quite active on Twitter, especially doing live tweets and stuff. But anyway, during the whole thing, he says, really afraid Coulson's going to make out with the wrong one. And yeah, basically this is a big fat dose of Coulson May shipping stuff. And this is something that's kind of been going on for a while. There seemed to be like there was something going on with Coulson and May back in season 1. But a lot of that you could at first sort of just chalk up to the fact that they had worked together for a long time. But as it wore on, it just seemed like there was more to it than that, particularly in that scene where May admits to Coulson that she'd been sleeping with Ward. And just how really just embarrassed she is about the whole situation. So here, I mean, it's really very hard to look at this and say, it was like, man, May's got a pretty serious thing for Coulson, and it's not just as a friend. I mean, her whole strategy is if Coulson starts to have some serious issues, she's basically going to take him off to her cabin in the Australian outback, which I kind of like to pretend is part of that ghost town that the X-Men used to live in back in the 80s X-Men comics. I know that probably doesn't quite exactly make sense, and the X-Men don't exist in the Marvel Cinematic Universe yet. But yeah, that's just like, okay, May. It's just like, now again, I'm not really a shipping person, but I'm certainly not immune to these cute moments between the characters, or feeling for them when they have those romantic desires that just can't get what they want. So it really would not surprise me though if they do go down that road at some point here in the future this season, because Coulson and the cellist probably ain't gonna happen. But what's really interesting here, of course, is ultimately that Coulson says, one, May, if something happens to me, you're gonna have to take over as director of S.H.I.E.L.D. And May, being a badass and obviously a pretty good organizer, as we've seen, would not be the worst choice. But on the other hand, May, as we've also seen, is really, really not good with people. I mean, she does fine when it's part of the undercover assignment, but just dealing with the team around her, I mean, she kind of really had to be dragged into bonding with the team. But we did see that May wasn't always like that, and she has come a long way. So, I mean, if something were to happen to Coulson and May had to take over as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., I think she'd be okay. She would certainly do her damnedest, but at the end of the day, Melinda May is really not the person to rebuild S.H.I.E.L.D. I mean, she'd give it a hell of a go, but this is something that has to be on Coulson's shoulders. He's the guy that can do it, and he's really the only guy that can do it. And I think May knows that. I think May knows that she just would not be up to that, try as she might. And it is very interesting to see somebody like May, this super badass lady, literally just running from a conversation. Now, granted, it's a conversation that basically amounts to, you're going to need to shoot one of the people you care about most in the world in the head if if they don't get better. So, it certainly is understandable that she really would not want to have that little chat with Coulson. Now, as for Coulson's side of things, I don't think he's quite Jones to exactly what's going on with May's feelings for him. I think he just sees it as, May is my longtime friend and ally, and of course she isn't going to want to kill me or have any kind of conversation that involves the idea of my death. But we do get these really nice moments where Coulson is shown to just really, really know May. He picks up on that imposter pretty darn quick. At first, of course, it's just like, May's acting a little odd, and it's like, ooh, that's very suspicious. And then, of course, he figures it out, and we get one of these situations where it's can't talk. We actually get to see a full-on fight between a male and a female character, which is generally not something they like to do on TV because, well, to put it bluntly, some people always start screaming about domestic violence for some unfathomable reason, even though this has absolutely nothing to do with this sort of thing. Then, of course, it switches over to May versus her double, who I guess is using some technology similar to what Black Widow had in Winter Soldier, and it gets much more conventional. That said, though, that was a pretty spectacular fight. I think it's probably one of the best ones we've had on S.H.I.E.L.D. so far. And while not quite up to the stunt work we get over on Arrow, which in my book has basically the best action on TV, it was still pretty darn good. And the whole slamming her face into the table thing there towards the end, yeah, that was pretty darn good. And it's always fun to see Coulson butt heads with Talbot. Though it's also nice to see that Talbot is coming around somewhat. I mean, he's still being a bit of a jerk where he's like, yeah, keep talking to me so that I can work on tracing where you are. Like, yeah, Talbot, you're not going to do that. Coulson, like, S.H.I.E.L.D. is probably a lot better at this crap than the Army is, so Talbot's wasting his time. But it was, good of Coulson and May to give Talbot that heads up. But of course, it's also in their best interest that he kind of know what's going on, so that he can, take some steps to make it harder for Hydra to pull something similar in the future. So I do think that Talbot is generally going to come around, and if things do take a more positive role for S.H.I.E.L.D., like say by the end of the season, maybe going into season 3, they've reestablished some of their credibility with the government, then I imagine Talbot's probably going to be a big part of that, because if somebody like him who says, like, look, I used to hate S.H.I.E.L.D., but even I've got to admit that, like, yeah, Coulson and his guys are good people who are out there trying to do the right thing, we should probably, at the very least, just kind of back off and spend more of our time and resources on catching the actual bad guys. Well, that would certainly be something. Now let me see. Moving on to Fitz. Now, Fitz is, as we've seen over the course of these episodes, he's gotten a lot better about speaking, and this is just kind of, as I've said before, his brain sort of adjusting to his new reality. And the fact that he's talking less and less to Head Simmons, I don't really think that's more of an example of actual changes in his brain so much as him just forcing himself to actually interact with other people and thus speak to them in the way that he knows he needs to. Now, of course, Fitz is not 100% there. He even says, I can't use my hands properly. That's why Hunter has to step in. And he's still goofing and dropping words and things like that. But he's gotten a lot better about it. And this is all. Well, this is good. This episode we find out that he basically thinks that part of the reason Simmons left is that she didn't want to deal with the repercussions of him telling her how he felt about her, which just means like, yeah, he got his brain broken and his heart broken. So it's like, man, Fitz, what a bummer. And of course, saw at the end of the last season that no, man, we don't know exactly how Fitz might feel on the romantics. Simmons might feel exactly on the romantic front towards Fitz, but we know that she cares about him profoundly. So I imagine we're in for some really happy stuff once these two finally get to reunite and put all their cards on the table. But I imagine it's going to be a long and painful road till that happens. But I did like that we also got to see Fitz finally come around a little bit, start engaging with the other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, and they got the little moments, Trip and Sky flirting some more, Hunter and Mac, just kind of talking about chicks, and Fitz coming in there and starting to engage with them a little bit. He's already got a little bit of a bond with Mac, and now him kind of coming out there and starting to be a little bit more of the team is ultimately going to be really good for him. And there's even a little bit of characterization for Hunter, who's like, hey man, you helped save my life, let me buy you a beer. And just the fact that he's just sitting there shooting the breeze with the other agents kind of shows that he's doing a fairly good job of integrating himself into the team. And then, of course, we get the stinger to all these things of Whitehall forcibly drafting Reyna into getting him the obelisk. And here we show that, unsurprisingly, a guy who used to be a Nazi is a really, really awful person. So not much else to say about Whitehall, but I do like the idea that Reyna does not think even for a moment this guy is someone to be taken lightly. She is clearly terrified of this dude, and well, with good reason. But well, what happens, I guess, if she throws the Doctor, that's what they're calling Sky's dad, at Whitehall, aka Kraken. I mean, it's too. Well, we don't know what the Doctor's deal is, but let's just assume he's probably not one of the good guys, and let's say antagonist versus antagonist. And I would be really interested to know if that thing in her hand contains a microphone, because if it doesn't, Whitehall's kind of stupid. But let me see. Anything else I need to talk about this episode? No. Oh, I do want to say there was some really nice location work. I guess it was. Well, it was supposed to be set out in California, and this being an American show, it was probably genuinely filmed out there somewhere in California. But wherever it was they did the filming for that episode, really, really was some gorgeous, gorgeous country. So very nice use of SoCal goodness there, folks. And with that, I think I'm going to call it for this review. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Who's Your Jedi. Till next time, take care and have a good one.